applause, let's welcome the right thing that sips communion wine with a calabash, Nana Asaase.
Good evening. I was just asking if it's okay to be nervous, because I'm feeling very nervous right now. Yes. My life has been the life of a writer, and I choose to title it Finding My Voice. Finding My Voice. Let me ask if it's okay to speak bits of my mother tongue. I love to speak Chi. Is it okay? Okay. I've made a few observations growing up, how the arts have transitioned over the past 17 to 20 years, where it's the phenomenon of having an artist come up, trying to make ends meet, but nobody really lives on the arts full time. Are there any witnesses in here? Anybody in the arts who knows how this trend has run the past 17 to 20 years? Nobody is able to come up and do anything meaningful with the arts. And what you keep getting is this. You find a young person who comes fresh out of school, who tries to pursue his dream, then the first thing you get in our part of the world, you're given all the reasons why this idea will not work, even before you land halfway through your idea. Okay. So I've had it come at me from several quarters in several directions. And then 3 years down the line, my line manager had me one-on-one on a live interview set. And he told the whole world, 3 years ago when this young man wanted to quit, I was one of the people who thought, he's so crazy. What is he going to do with his life? He should wait for all of us to see what is going to come up. But 3 years down the line, he has proven me wrong. And all I could do was just swallow the tears that almost came out. That when I was leaving, he couldn't tell me this to the face. But the pleasant bit was this, that 3 years down the line, he actually came out to admit this to the rest of the world. Which means that whatever your hands find to do, may I say it? Whatever your hands find to do, pursue with all that you've got, and it will not fail you. And so I tell my fellow artists, respect your art will respect you, and no third person can take you for granted. Now, growing up was a bit of fun, playing all the pilolo, the chaskele, the police and thief, which there was spitting here as well. And, Chalima Minifapa. There was stay. And there was a memorable thing we used to do. Every time we would play stay, we lived in the doctor's bungalows in Koforidua, so we had quite these patches where we would play soccer. And we would transfer the game from one bungalow to the, deliberately, one bungalow to the next, all the way to almost close to the main road from Accra. What was the aim? The aim was to change the scene of the game and to get the person who needs to go and chase the ball as far from the main spot of the game as possible, so that we can all afford to be in our homes. And the beauty of the game happened like this. When as early as 7:30, your daddy comes to call you. Oh, Philip, Niamu is looking for you. The moment you open the door, stay. Trust me, now, looking back then we might have thought it was just a game. Back then we might have just thought we were having fun. But I still maintain that once we lost that sense of communal living, then a lot of things began to go wrong. Once we lost that sense of communal play, doing things together, that is what has made us as Africans. We began to lose a lot of things. Growing up, I fed a lot from the communal spirit. These have been a lot of motivation in my work. Another thing that has been motivation for me growing up was the home system. I grew up in a home where both parents were educated by God's grace, but we spoke a lot of Twi at home. And so I picked my mother tongue very well. I believe that in this life, some things are for people to learn, others are for people to come down with from wherever we come down onto this plane. Maybe mine was with language, and the Queen's language happened to be very unfortunate. It found itself into my life at an early age. So at a very early age, the Queen's language was there. And you realize that at every level of your education, you must be master of a certain level of vocabulary. There was a secret. I had a little bit of a challenge physically. And so I couldn't go out to play all the soccer and all the police and thief. Once in a while, I'd have a role, but so sometimes playing Bluebird all over the school compound, I'll just sneak into the library. And when I got into the library and I picked the books in my class, and I realized, this guy's studying, doing, keeping these books for my age grade. So I'll go into the senior section, sneak the book out, mark exactly where it's placed, so that I can always go and pick it out. So I decided to do this. Live like a saint, but think like a criminal. To the extent that I met Greek mythology at a very early age. And so when I was not so confident at the time as well, so I would just sneak into the library and I enjoy the world of all these Greek characters and Greek gods and Viking images and all of those things. At that time, they used to excite my mind a lot. All the Bible stories I had in Sunday school. Anytime I would look at these terrazzo floors, you know these terrazzo floors with a lot of designs, I could see all my Bible characters in there. Anytime I'll stop to look into the clouds, I could see the 7 voyages of Sinbad playing out in there with so many crazy things, and I thought it was very odd at my age. So these were things I couldn't talk to my friends about. I didn't know how they would react or relate to it. Another thing that got me going up, we had all these content on TV. All this content on TV, with all respect to anybody. But I believe the moment we switched over from our GTVs straight into DSTV, it was very abrupt. Most of our children, most of us, most of my generation began to lose touch with who we really are. Then that wannabeism descended into the system and then people started to drift off. But it's okay. I always call it good for people like me and good for people like us who get to benefit from these experiences. So that was By the Fireside. How many of us saw By the Fireside? How many of us saw Inspector Bidiako? How many of us saw the TNT classic movies? The late movies? Pardon me? Charlie, you're good. And they usually would show it also after 11:30, TNT classic. Good. You know, there were all these things, and we would watch TV on the way down to the DNL just to wait for By the Fireside. And these stories stayed with me. These stories would play in my dreams when I was all by myself, because I was a bit, was it odd? Or I lived in a world of my own. I would come out and have conversations with everybody, but to myself. I would like to think of all these stories I had read and how sometimes I could see all these funny characters walking all over the house, which nobody could see. One other thing I tried to do, in my school, the English prize would either be picked by a kid wearing spectacles. There was one of my Charlie, and those days when a kid was in spectacles, this guy was smart. He was a shark, you know. Or a lady would pick the prize. I did all I could, all the way to class 5. I could never pick this prize. And then something happened to me. I changed schools from Koforidua and then into Cape Coast. Then in Cape Coast, I realized I had another thing with music. I was like, okay, so you don't only have the language, you also have music, and in between you have a lot of characters to fill to make music and your reading very pleasant. I did not know it, but I was told at that age I used to speak very well. I had this knack for words. I would just, all I wanted to do was just to create. So I just picked this word game, put a word there and try and get as many words from it as possible. I would go out to read the dictionary. It was odd, but it's okay. Now I'm very comfortable living with that kind of thing. Who has ever heard that term, too known? Too known. The corruption of the word too known. Good. I started hearing that term approximately from age 4. We too known. We too known. We too known. Delano, and anybody here, how many of you remember when we used to open the video deck? I was around age 6 or 7. We'll open a video deck because you've seen a terrible movie. We used to do it. And then we'll clean it with spirit. We'll try to clean the head with spirit and then check it to make sure it's clear before your parents come home. And so all you got was, Charlie, you are too known. They didn't know that before everybody else saw the movie, Charlie, we had already seen the movie with one of our old men's decks. So when everybody was watching the movie, we would be running commentary on the movie. So you are too known, you're too known, you're too known. I had read a lot of African writers, and Communal Dumont's voice was in vogue. Trust me, around the time, Communal was that thing. Everybody wanted to have that deep voice in there. But then I came to find something between the art and then the divine when I heard my mentor's voice. It is on the ends of old ropes that new ones are woven. And so only a foolish son will point to his father's house with a left finger. So pardon me to pay him all the respect. His name is Professor Kofi Anyidoho. I choose to call him Efo Wahala. He used to write a column in the dailies in the early 90s. And there was an episode of African Heritage Series. He was with the late Professor Ali Mazrui on Dahomey. There was a temple dedicated to one of these African deities. And there was a line. Can you close your eyes with me? Close your eyes with me. Let's take a very simple exercise. Close your eyes with me. Dahomey, the home of the serpent and the rainbow. Eyes open. And so that was it. It stayed with me every night. I'll just get up and sit. Dahomey, the home of the serpent. And I told myself, Mom, I want to meet this man. The funny thing I added before he dies. And every time I'll just keep going at it. I just wanted to meet this man. And after that voice, I realized, after we were asked to write our first poems on books, this little voice would always come to me, ask me to pick a pencil and a paper, and it would start dictating. When it was done dictating, anything you tried to add did not make meaning. And all I kept doing was, Dahomey, the home of the serpent and the rainbow. I was still being too known. I was still curious, still watching by the fireside, all those other details. But now I had found somebody to look up to. I had found a direction. So I would never miss that episode. And then I started listening to all these documentaries on who we are as a people and Africanness, and I realized, well, it's a very interesting thing to know that we don't just sing songs, we don't just play these games in a vacuum, and that really they had a backing, and that it was really a beautiful thing to be proud of. I am a poet. Where is my being? So let me share some poetry with you. Am I permitted? I am. Okay. Go be on your feet. Please. Thank you very much. Agu. Here. Please be on your seat. The Creator sits at the junctions where earth and sea and sky meet to share gossip. That place where miracles are daily occurrence. That place beyond which no mortal eyes can see. That place where I come from. The place where miracles are daily occurrence. You hear me shriek in the coughs of the bells. You hear me sneeze in the tongues of the drums. But I hide my fears in the hollows of the frontal drum. When I step out to play, you might probably hear my heartbeat on the strings. But in Penisium, it's only for the mind. Depth of the tongue is the height of the mind. In Penimbekam Penisium, Mofrabetuan and Sisem, shadows would find their places on the walls. I am the writer king who sips communion wine from the calabash. Obviously, I did not come to pour libation. But I ask you, who will divine the future of the diviner? And who will prophesy to the prophet? In Penise, Sumina such emfresi when Yiniachen and Subeshan Assess and Yon no notiase. Niakenyan would yaminsem, then our shadows would find their places on the walls. Thank you. The difference between poetry and spoken word. Poetry is an art form defined in the three genres of literature. That's poetry, drama, prose. I won't go into too much detail with poetry. But I've come to realize that poetry lives beyond the stanza, and poetry does not live in verse. Poetry is a skill of handling language, using the economy of words. Right. Poetry can be presented in oratory form, that is spoken, or in written form. Poetry could also be presented as being read. Does anybody believe in the divine? Everything we practice as an art form is divine. Everything we practice as an art form is divine. So that when an apprentice wants to go study something, in GSU opportunity, right? He's there to commit to the master because the spirit of the trade lives on the master. Upon the spirit is passed on from the master to him by laying on hands or the ceremony. That is how it is. And so please, let us open up. Your art might be for accounting. Your art might be finance. Your art might be entrepreneurship. Whatever your art form is, mine is poetry. I'm making sure legacy starts now. Begin to pour it out. Do not sit on anybody's gate. You never know what it will become. You never know what it will become. And to any young person in here, if you allow anybody to steal your faith and your confidence, you are dead. If Tunun had stolen my faith and my confidence, the poet wouldn't be here today. The same people who said you are Tunun now, oh Charlie, this guy be my mate. Oh Charlie, Nana will cut selfie. Nana, I asked myself, excuse me, Charlie, the time that you dissed me for Gasco, when you used to insult me back then, were you really serious? So please, your gift is up to you to protect, practice, sharpen every single day while you wait for opportunity. I say opportunity comes at once, so that when opportunity comes that once, you are ready for it. And I hope I've answered you. I'm so passionate about these things, I could keep talking for 3 hours, trust me. Charles, create the platform, let's talk about some of these things. Thank you.